I'm Glenn Cochran. Welcome to Session 2 of the New York State Science Learning Standards, with a focus on the components of NYSSLS. These details will help make sense of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We will look at how these science standards make science learning accessible to all students. This session will review some of the innovations and the progressions that give coherence to NYSSLS. So why new standards? Why have 44 states adopted science standards based on the framework for K-12 science education? Let's take a look.
The world is moving so fast.
I know.
I hope that these kids are prepared for what's ahead of them.
We're learning from science standards written in 1996? I wasn't even born in 1996.
It's crazy to me to think that, all across the country, our kids are being taught from science standards that are 20 years old.
So my son being a freshman here, how can you assure me that the level of education he's going to receive will prepare him to succeed in not only colleges, but in careers after he gets out of school?
In the coming years, jobs in science, technology, engineering, and math are expected to increase twice as much as jobs in other fields. We can't predict the future, but we can better prepare our children for it.
Basically, the way science is being taught now, it's a lot more applicable into the real world, and we're able to take the skills that we're learning and bring them further than just high school or middle school.
So I was asking Taylor about, things she was doing in school, and she was so excited because she said, we're learning how to be engineers, Mom.
Now we're doing the next generation science standards, or the NGSS, and basically what happens is it takes what we were learning like from books before. It wasn't doing as much like hands-on, and now they're becoming their own scientists, they're becoming engineers. They get so excited about saying, okay, today we're going to be an engineer, and they know the engineering process, they know what they're going to do first and how to solve the problems.
So there's the problem solving, the brainstorming, the cause and effect, and the justification. I know that those skills will last throughout my whole life in any career field.
If you push a seesaw, it'll go back and forth.
Next generation science standards will give our children the tools they need.
These new science standards, it's really preparing them to be those critical thinkers and more prepared in the job force. I mean, that's the goal. That's what we all want for our kids.
Find out more about the next generation science standards.
Did you have the internet when you were little?
Science is an important tool for literate society. Science is the tool to understand, figure out, and solve problems related to Earth's natural systems. NYSSLS moves science teaching from memorizing and recall to a focus on students' thinking and developing a deep understanding of the core ideas of science. We want students to learn science by using the same skills used by scientists and engineers. When looking at a NYSSLS or NGSS class, students should be working together to figure out engaging phenomenon. The class is honoring diversity and local experiences as they build on prior knowledge, and inclusion is the norm of the class. Science is the path to equity. All standards, all students, flip upside down. A traditional compared to a contemporary approach to science class. Traditional science classes, scientists and teachers know the knowledge and develop the science disciplines and pass that along to some students. In the contemporary model, all students make sense of phenomena and design solutions to problems. And students act as scientists and engineers. National Science Teaching Association, NSTA, is a huge supporter of the framework for K-12 science education and NGSS. Their website has many resources, including the 4 videos of NGSS in the elementary classroom. The next 2 slides show segments of 2 of those videos. You are certainly welcome, and I encourage you to view the entire collection of elementary videos on the NSTA website. Also, there are many resources available for the classroom and deeper dives into the standards. Of course, those are NGSS standards, but those are very similar to NYSSLS.
Introduction to Three-Dimensional Learning, Funds of Knowledge, and Place-Based Science.
How can we make symbols for grass, for example?
These videos show Melina Lozano's first attempt to teach the NGSS with her students. She is a new teacher but loves teaching science.
I'm teaching at an elementary school in Madison, Wisconsin, and we're in a 2nd and 3rd grade bilingual classroom.
How did they get to this place of modeling and sense-making? How did Melina's shifts take place? Melina already has a strong linkage with her students through connections with families and with the students' language and culture. She is ready to start changing thinking about approaching science teaching to support three-dimensional learning.
Okay, let's do it.
Three-dimensional learning means that students use disciplinary core ideas, scientific practices, and cross-cutting concepts to make sense of phenomena they experience in their environment.
So the 3-week unit examines in detail how water interacts with the land and then how the land in turn interacts with the water. We start with sort of just beginning understanding and beginning to make explanations with evidence, and then they use a model to sort of try to figure out if there's a way that they can show what they understand. And in NGSS, that model becomes increasingly more sophisticated over time. So their first interactions are more like they're just kind of discovering and thinking through things. And then they gradually start getting more and more information that they can use to refine their model and revise their model. And they're also developing more complex language, more scientific language. In the end, they're going to be figuring out a way to stop the water from changing the land. So they're going to have an engineering solution where they're presented with some kind of problem like a puddle underneath the swing, and they have to figure out how to use the knowledge that they've collected to solve a problem. So the end lesson can be sort of like an assessment where you're really seeing what do the kids learn from this unit.
In these videos, you will see our students participating in collaborative conversations and engaging in three-dimensional learning to make sense of phenomena they experience in their lives. Supporting talk. To engage in the practices of the NGSS, the science classroom must become discourse-rich. Sense-making to meet the three-dimensional learning, and in particular, collaborative sense-making, calls for students to engage in talk, and the teacher needs to support that talk. This means major shifts for teachers.
We're finding out that kids, even like really little kids, have like wonderful ideas in science, and that if we stop and like sort of mine their experiences to get at those ideas, it can make science like really, really fun.
How does this look in a classroom?
Maybe there was snow on it.
Who heard what Yadira said? Put your thumb up if you heard what she said. Did you hear what Yadira said? Is there anyone who didn't hear? What about you? Did you hear what she said? Then ask her. Can you say that again?
Can you say that again? That when a girl or a guy drove something, maybe when they went back somewhere, the wheels that they were using had snow.
So, do these standards support all students? If you're working in a group, pause the video and talk about how this model of teaching science now has encouraged more students, all standards, all students. I'm going to take a look at some columns here, columns of terms. I'd like you to look to see how those terms are related. So this first list, asking questions, defining problems, developing and using models, planning and carrying investigations. What do all of those terms and phrases have in common? These are the science and engineering practices. These are what the students will be doing in order to learn. How about this column? Patterns, cause and effect, scale, proportion, and quantity, systems, energy and matter. These are the cross-cutting concepts. These are the universal underlying concepts that are prevalent through all the sciences, in fact, through other subjects as well. These are what students will use to view phenomena, to phrase questions, and to structure their thinking around the core ideas. This diagram shows something that's very fundamental to this shift to 3D instruction. Authentic phenomena and problems are what we're looking for and trying to figure out. And in order to do that, students need to have content. That's the disciplinary core ideas. Students also will be doing the science and engineering practice in order to learn those disciplinary core ideas. And they'll be looking through the lenses of cross-cutting concepts and how they will question and view that phenomenon. Let's take a quick look at the structure of NYSSLS. What you see here is actually a grade 4. Just to recall, every elementary grade has subject-specific content related to what they're supposed to do and learn in each grade. So this is a grade 4. And on the top, we see the PEs, or performance expectations. These are the actual standards of what students are expected to know and be able to do by the end of instruction. These below are the 3 dimensions in the blue, orange, and green boxes. The blue are the SEPs, science engineering practices. Orange are the DCIs, or disciplinary core ideas, basically the content, and the cross-cutting concepts. At the end of each of the elements, this right here is an element showing you the element related to the content. And at the end of that is the particular performance expectation that will relate to that. At the bottom of the page, we have connections to the New York State Next Generation Learning Standards for math and ELA. The science and engineering practices are not just standalone single practices. When you look at a PE, it indicates a particular practice for that standard. But when actually conducting investigations and learning science, basically we have the phenomenon, the idea of what is it are we trying to figure out, and then we will expect students to ask questions about that phenomenon. In order to figure out that phenomenon, we might plan out and carry out investigations, collect and analyze data, develop initial models, obtain, evaluate, and communicate information, engage in argument from the evidence developed, maybe go back and do some more investigations. Eventually, we want to be able to construct explanations and make sense of the natural world around us. The 7 cross-cutting concepts. This is a way to focus the questions we're going to ask about the phenomenon. This is the lens to view that phenomenon and how we can think about that phenomenon. I'll give you an example. We might be interested in how does it work? The cause and effect and the structure and function. We might be interested in the parts. What are the components of the system that we're studying? Or we might be interested in the changes or the patterns that we're noticing. These are the disciplinary core ideas. They're broken down into 4 sections. 3 of them are probably familiar to you when we talk about science: the physical science, life science, and earth and space sciences. The different one here is engineering and technology. All the grades in elementary, all of the disciplines for life, earth, and physical sciences all have engineering components to it. Let's take a quick look at a commercial from GE that shows the role of engineering, and here we go.
Molly, can you please take out the trash? Molly, can you please take out the trash? Hey, Molly? Ding, ding, ding.
Molly, it's time to go.
Class, let's turn to page 136, recessive traits in generation.
How's the new movement sequence going?
Great. Let me show you.
Please do.
I reprogrammed the robots to do the inspection. It's running much faster now. See?
It's amazing, Molly.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look at some more detail about the performance expectations. These performance expectations are what students are expected to be able to know and do at the end of instruction. They aren't curriculum. We don't teach directly to these, but they can be bundled in a plan that will lead to construction of curriculum or storylines. I want to point something out to you about the last one on this list. And the last one here has a little asterisk around it. Now, this is a grade 1 physical science 4-4. And notice it says use tools and materials to design and build a device that uses light or sound in order to solve a problem of communicating over a distance. This is an engineering performance expectation. And this would be an opportunity for students to build something. We also see a clarification statement about what it is that will give you a little more information about what it is that the students are expected to know and do. There is also an assessment boundary, which means that don't go into that additional information, or at least that will not be accessible. And you'll notice too, in each one of these performance expectations, we have a science and engineering practice. This one says plan and conduct an investigation. They also have some content. Vibrating materials can make sound, and that sound can make materials vibrate. And embedded in that is also the cross-cutting concept. Can make materials vibrate. That is cause and effect. So each one of these statements is a statement that represents a three-dimensional look at science. This is a little bit about the cross-cutting concepts. And you'll like you to notice that there are 4 bands, K2, 3-5, middle, and high school. Just from this pattern, you can see there's only 1 for K2, but as you move up through the grades, you see the number of elements increase significantly. Let's take a look. So in K2, patterns in the natural and human designed world can be observed, used to describe phenomena, and used as evidence. But when we move into 3-5, that increases to a little more depth in that the patterns can be used to make predictions. When we move into 6-8, middle school, now we're looking at graphs, charts, and images that can be used to identify patterns in data. So we're getting a little more mathematical. And then when we get to the high school, we're looking at mathematical representations needed to identify patterns, and empirical evidence is needed to identify patterns. So the foundation is being laid in elementary K-5, and as you move through the grades at appropriate levels, students are expected to develop more understandings of each of these cross-cutting concepts. When we look at the SEPs, or the science and engineering practices, we see a very similar pattern. We have K2, 3-5, middle, and high school. And I'm going to follow the same one as we move through the plan. There are other elements, by the way, for planning and carrying out investigations, but that's all I could fit on the slide. In K2, it's about collaborating to produce data to serve as a basis of evidence to answer a question. In 3-5, similar idea, except now they're using fair tests in which variables are controlled and the number of trials are considered. We move to middle school, and we're going to now identify dependent and independent variables and controls and consider the sort of tools that are needed to gather the measurements and how they will be recorded and how many data points are needed in order to support a claim. When we get to high school, of course, we're now much more complex in designing individually or collaboratively for data to serve as evidence for building and revising models, supporting explanations, testing solutions to problems, and consider possible variables or effects to evaluate the confounding investigations designed to ensure variables are controlled. Again, notice how much this builds. K2 and 3-5, very important. So by the time they get to middle school, they will be ready for that next step. This is the DCI coherence. This is a matrix for K2, 3-5, middle and high school, but this is specific to NYSSLS. So what I want to point out to you here is that some of these elements that are part of the content have an NYSED in front of them. These are elements that have been modified or added to NYSSLS from NGSS. Just like before, at the end of each one of these, it shows you this one is a kindergarten, this one is a grade 5, and then of course, middle and high school. So it's just a little more detail for you. This K2 for one of the life science content areas. In K2 from kindergarten, the students should learn that all animals need air, water, food in order to live and grow and thrive. Animals obtain food from plants or from other animals, and plants need water, air, and light to live and grow and thrive. When they get to 3-5, there's a little difference. We're taking a look at what does the animal do with that food, with the materials they need for body repair, growth, and the energy they need to maintain warmth and motion. And plants acquire the materials they need chiefly from air and water. The line behind that is not from the soil. Just take a look at what happens as we get to middle and high school. The content is greatly enhanced with terms, phytoplankton, microorganisms, photosynthesis, releasing oxygen, sugars. And then we get to high school, it becomes even more complex in terms of the details of some of the chemistry associated with this topic. So, elementary science, I hope you get the idea, is foundational for success in middle and high school. Elementary science is important. K-5 students learning the skills and continue building on making sense of the big concepts. Children are naturally inquisitive. They are basically like scientists in the way they can perceive the world. Don't kill that wonder. I thank you for participating in session 2. Session 3, we'll take a closer look at the essentials of NYSSLS curriculum. I thank you for your attention.